the crisis, the health crisis, to any Chinese mainland tourists. And he texted me that he has shared or delegated the authority to the DOH through Secretary Duque. Your Honor, may I confirm if this is indeed accurate? And second, if it is your task to do so, are you inclined at the soonest possible time to ban first the entry of any mainland Chinese tourists while the virus is still not contained in mainland China? Just that basic question, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Representative. The situation remains fluid, and certainly the task force of the DOH on the novel coronavirus meets every now and then, and in fact very frequently, to be guided by the recommendations from the WHO. They bridge the DOH to the health authorities in Wuhan city in particular, the Hubei province, and the whole of China for that matter. And certainly that's one of the possible options that we are looking at, but not at this very moment.
Okay.
The reason being, Your Honor, is we have to be very careful also about the possible repercussions of doing this in the light of the fact that the confirmed cases of coronaviruses are not limited to China, but now, in fact, in several countries, as I have shown on the slides. And if we do this, then the concerned country, and China in this case, might question why we're not doing the same for all the other countries that have reported confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus. So it's a very tricky, very difficult issue that you have raised, but certainly we commit to take this into consideration as we move on in making the necessary adjustments or revisions in our guidelines, Your Honor.
Mr. Secretary, in my understanding, then only flights from Wuhan to the Philippines has been banned. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that this is an international airport in Wuhan. So I think there are many other provinces. The Chinese nationals would need to go to one of the international airports, one of the major international airports. So now, at least for Wuhan, there's been a lockdown. The Chinese government has already restricted travel to and from Wuhan city, and I think even Hubei at this point, but subject to validation.
Since we are a heavily populated country and we are clearly incapable of handling such a health crisis should it happen in the Philippines, would it not be prudent, Mr. Secretary, to be proactive and ban temporarily any mainland Chinese tourists in any airport or port, not just Wuhan, since the coronavirus has spread to other cities in China? Again, let me not be misconstrued. I just value too much the health of the Filipino people. And 108 million people, heavily populated, dikit-dikit sa mga syudad po. And we do not have the resources nor perhaps the medical know-how. We have to send some of our tests to Australia. So would it not be prudent for us? Take, for example, Subic, when the residents protested against the entry of a cruise ship bearing the mainland Chinese residents who may or may not be inflicted with the coronavirus. So this is actually not my personal belief, but I've been asked as an elected representative, not only of my province, but of even other representatives who may be shy to manifest this, or other people. And they're asking, what are you in Congress doing? So I asked Secretary Locsin, and I can show you the text of Secretary Teddy. He said, Lauren, I agree with you. You may be right. So I tried to call you the other night. I understand you're very busy. We could not communicate with each other. So I'm putting it on record on the possibility of just temporarily closing to mainland because it has spread there. I'm not saying that all others where there are 1 or 2 victims that we should close our tourism to those areas, but should we not close it? I recall that there is a Wuhan Katiklan flight which was operating until last Wednesday, and your very efficient DOH personnel had to look for the Wuhan individuals who were already in Boracay vacationing and had to be retrieved from Boracay and returned back to Wuhan. Correct me if my information is inaccurate. So do we still need to do that? To allow some Chinese from Wuhan who may have gone to Shanghai or Beijing and infected some people there to come to the Philippines because we have not closed our doors and look for them in our provinces and then send them back? Would it not be more efficient that we simply just say no for the meantime until the situation has been contained in mainland China? Just a question, Mrs. I know it's very tricky. I realize there are political and diplomatic repercussions, but for me, the health of the Filipino people, especially those who may not have the resources to buy masks, to stay away from each other, if that is at stake, then we must do everything to protect our people. Secretary. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Representative. First of all, I share with you your concern for the health of the Filipino people. That is the mandate of the DOH. And in terms of the preparedness of the DOH to deal with this challenge, as I have said, we have scaled up, we have leveled up our border surveillance. Our quarantine officers are well equipped to make sure that patients who will be classified as persons under investigation will be isolated. Consequently, they will be subjected to further evaluation.
Thank you.
And the specimens, the collection will be sent to the reference lab, the RITM, which is the primary laboratory that does the testing. The second level would be the Regional Epidemiology and Surveillance Unit. The mechanism is also in place. So we've leveled up across the spectrum of the health system that is to respond to the event even when the coronavirus enters the country. But let me reassure you, Your Honor, that we will always bear in mind this very well meaning recommendation that you have so eloquently articulated. And certainly we will think of it. We will always consider this in the next task force meetings, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mrs. Secretary. Mr. Speaker, my last question, Mr. Speaker, is I have read in reports in the news that some of the blood tests have been sent to Australia, and I would imagine that our private hospitals or the DOH or the RITM that does the processing of the results of the blood tests are the Philippine authorities in health under DOH, do we have the equipment, the personnel to assess immediately whether it is coronavirus, or are the technology and the equipment not available in the Philippines under DOH or RITM or any agency of DOH? And if so, what is needed so that in the NEP of 2021, which you're doing now, kindly put all the trainings for your personnel, all the equipment needed under DOH, under RITM, is that correct, RITM.
RITM.
That's the one that's doing it, right? Is there any other agency that is equipped with that? And why are we sending the results to Australia yet to confirm or verify if it is coronavirus? Are we incapable of knowing the results here in our medical facilities, Mr.
Yes.
Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Representative, the testing capability wasn't available until today. Because Japan, as I have said earlier, has brought the contingent from Japan, which is the RITM counterpart, has arrived this morning with the RNA primer and the reagents needed to identify the novel coronavirus in persons under investigation. And by Friday, I was assured by the Executive Director of RITM that the setup will be ready and they will be testing the specimens once submitted to them. So that way, the need for an international confirmatory testing will no longer be necessary.
When do we know? Last question. When do we know whether the 27 is just flu or coronavirus, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Speaker?
Pardon me?
How do we confirm whether the 27 under investigation is
yes.
actually...
The specimens, these are throat swabs, oropharyngeal, nasopharyngeal swabs. Part of the protocol, testing protocol, is automatically sending these specimens to the RITM, and they do an initial testing. It's a little bit technical. My apologies. The RITM initially runs the FTD 33 test. This is a test for several viruses and bacteria, some other microbes. But unfortunately, that initial testing capability cannot identify specifically the novel coronavirus. It can identify the pan-coronavirus, which is non-specific. And that should trigger, therefore, a higher level testing, which is going to be more definitive for the novel coronavirus. And like I have said, Your Honor, this will now be available by Friday, Your Honor. But we will, of course, certainly submit to you. I have already been given an indicative budget that will support us mount a more effective response to this emerging infectious disease.
Thank you, Madam, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Secretary. Thank you.